So much, Jennifer, for the great introduction. I always like to add that I am at home, so I added that bit about my dogs in case either of them hear another dog or hear a mailman or anything like that. Thank you so much for your patience. But so happy to be here, and let me start with thank you all so much for all that you do, especially during this time. I'm very excited to present to you on this topic. So as we said, social media live streaming for legislative staff. So an overview, I'll do that before I get right into things. If anyone doesn't watch, one of my favorite parts of the day is at about 7 a.m. My husband and I are about ready for work. We've watched the local news and the Today shows coming on. And from 7 to 9, given I'm currently working from home, as I said, I love listening to Savannah Guthrie, Hoda Kotb, Al Roker, and the gang. And you're probably wondering why I'm telling you this. So in a non-COVID world, my colleague Mick Bullock and I use this similar equipment that you may see on the Today show, maybe not quite as fancy, to broadcast from our studio in DC or from Legislative Summit, wherever we may be. Today, we utilize online third-party software to connect our social media accounts, which are already established. It's just like an app that you can download on your phone, essentially. Anyone with a smartphone and a social media account can now direct their own broadcast, and this includes elected officials and legislative staff. And now I'm going to show you how. My goal for this presentation is for you to leave with an additional option to reach constituents, or if you are already doing something similar, hopefully you get a bit more knowledge for your tool belt, and we can show folks the great work that legislatures are doing across our country. So as I said, overview, we're going to look at the basics, and some folks might already know that. That includes anything from the platforms you can use to tools, and then an inside look, essentially what NCSL does. So preparation, execution, and post-production of live streaming on our social media, and then best practices that I can offer you. So now I'm going to do a quick poll because I like to keep folks engaged in this online environment. So the question's going to pop up, but do you utilize live streaming now? All right, it looks like we have about 92% voted, which is great. And I think the end results will pop up in a second. All right, so just about 60% said yes, 40% said no. So that is great odds actually for a presentation like this. So we'll have some refresher and then we'll have some new information. And so for those who are live streaming already, I love to hear that, and hopefully I can offer you some new information. So first though, like I said, the basics, I'm gonna go through what is live streaming. So on social media platforms, certain platforms like Facebook and Instagram have built-in features. On Facebook, it's called Facebook Live. I know LinkedIn has this as well, LinkedIn Live. Instagram has stories as well as reels. There are a few different options. For NCSL, we utilize Facebook for our living room town halls. I think that was in the description of the registration. And then for YouTube, we do state legislature spotlights. So those things that go into our magazine and our digital newsroom. And this image here is an example of what our living room town hall looks like. That is on our Facebook platform. So who is doing this? As I said, elected officials are utilizing this option. They're between 50 and 70% are on social media. It depends on the platform. It's about 50 to 55% for Facebook and just under 70% on Twitter and Instagram. But also legislative chambers, caucuses, and agencies, which I think is particularly helpful. And we track social media for states. And the reason I bring this up is you can see here, there are a couple, we have a website that shows Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram accounts. And with that, I was able to actually pull up a couple of examples here. So for our benefit, for your benefit, why do we do live streaming? And a couple of the examples I pulled up that are featured, the California Senate Democrats, as well as the Indiana House Republicans, have both utilized this feature in the past 2 months, essentially. So, and the live streams range from anywhere, because I watched a few minutes of them, from 5 to 30 minutes on updates going on from a virtual environment. So for your benefit, these provide live feedback. I know if you operate social media right now, you usually want to wait a few days to get some really good results or analytics. You get them right in the prime while the video is going. You have better engagement. So folks, this will pop up on your algorithm. That's why I call it beat the algorithm. This will pop up before a general post or a general picture. It'll go to the top of someone's page. And when someone sees movement like this, they are more likely to stay engaged. A photo holds someone's attention for about 3 seconds. Videos are quite a bit longer. And then you can share new resources with live streaming, whether that is just face-to-face, you're talking about the new resources, or you're using a platform that actually shows the resources while you're doing that. And so here are a couple of examples I pulled from our social media just to show you. So live feedback, you're gonna get comments, and you see a couple of these are within 9-10 seconds, one's within a minute. And then you can see, I'm not just making it up, you do get better engagement. So if you know on Facebook, for example, how to access analytics, which I will walk through in a bit, almost 1,000 people interacted with this living room town hall where we talked about upcoming ballot measures. And so that showcases to me that folks were well engaged with this, and this is a topic that folks want to hear again. And then, so when to utilize this. So I talked about the what but when to do that, because that is a big question. I usually say look at who your audience is. So for constituents in this example, right now is actually an ideal time. A lot of states are socially distant right now, as well as legislatures. And so your outreach, this is a really great opportunity to utilize your social media live streaming. And so you can see I pulled a couple of examples here, both from Tennessee and from Pennsylvania, who have used their Instagram live story to showcase what was going on in session, whether it was a special or a regular session. Major updates, as well as name to face. And I'll show you a couple of examples of what I mean by that. So I've already talked about outreach, but for example, we used that when we had a center opening for evidence-based policymaking. We had a legislator from Alabama, as well as a legislator from Colorado, were able to join one environment. And usually that can be pretty difficult. So we don't usually have that opportunity unless we fly folks in. And this way, people are able to join from their living rooms. Major updates. When I mean that, I'm talking about we had an election campaign series that we did, and they were living room town halls, and we made a schedule that we promoted. And this was on ballot measures, pre and post analysis. An example I could use here is if you decided to do live streaming from this, you would have to check with your state guidelines, but from a committee meeting or on closer to when your policy is getting passed, and you can put out a schedule for that, and you can live stream from there. And then name to face. An example I have here is we hosted a town hall with our executive director, Tim Story. And a lot of the times folks may not know who he is unless they've been to a meeting. And so if you hadn't had a chance to meet him, you were able to watch the town hall. And an example for this that I would use is if there's an event that's going on in the legislature, or if whatever policy committee meeting may be going on, you can actually put committee heads, or you can put those names to faces, and people usually can relate a bit more when they see who is behind the work that is going on. So now let's talk about tools. So I love to talk about how to do things and why you should, but I want to show you what I mean. So on here, hopefully everyone appreciates my moving arrow. I took a couple of screenshots for you because I think these are the most helpful things that I can show. So on a general, if you have a Facebook page, whether it's for an agency or a caucus or a chamber, whatever you may be running, this is what it will look like from an organization, whatever you may have it labeled as. You can see where you can create a post. So most likely we've utilized this feature to just share an update that's been going on. But down below that, you can actually see create live. And if you were to click the create live, and I have my next picture over here that we're pointing to, and I skipped All right. You can actually see it takes, and this is on your desktop, keep in mind, it takes you to a couple of options. And to get started, it walks you through everything, but you can use a stream key or you can use your camera. And I usually say if you haven't been doing this before, I recommend using your camera if you're using the direct platform. And if you were to click that, it will walk you through on the left-hand side, put in a title, put in a description, and then you can start. So that's very simple. The stream key is a little more complicated, but just so you're aware of what it is, if you have an event and you're using broadcasting equipment, you can put that stream key into the equipment itself. Um, so continuing on tools, if you're on a phone, I know many of us may be doing things mobile or on site. We may not have all of our equipment with us. Here's what your Facebook will look like, the page, and it looks very similar to the desktop. You're going to have create post, and then you'll see photo, create story, and live. You're going to hit live, and currently you're going to see an image of my living room, but that is an example of what you would do, and it's actually it's a bit simpler this way. You just hit start live video, but you can add a location to where you are. So let's say you're in Georgia, that's my home state, and you're at a state fair or something like that. You can put in that location so folks can see where you are. And then another example of tools, I'm going to use Instagram. If you go to your home page, and then you can click that plus arrow in the top right-hand corner, it's going to bring up a few options. The one I recommend is your story. And then if you'll see a picture, you'll see an image of my dogs that I captured. So I promised and delivered on that one. But you can actually hit live, and that's how you can start your live update. And I'm going to talk about when to utilize each of these tools because I know this can seem like a lot, but I wanted to make sure we knew where to go in each of these built-in platforms that are free for us to use right now. And then third-party tools. So I've talked about that we use this, but there are other platforms. There's Periscope, which is just another application. Zoom actually has a capacity to do this. So if you're already comfortable with Zoom, you already know how this works, you can actually use Zoom and embed that onto your Facebook or LinkedIn. Other free tools are Restream and Broadcast Me. These allow you to have a live stream, but you can push it out onto multiple platforms if you'd like to do that. So those are what those are very good for. And then there are paid options that I'm going to include. The others were all free. So NCSL uses Be Live, and then another option is StreamYard. And I just like to include that as an option because you'll be seeing a couple of screenshots of what we use later. But please know that let's say you haven't done this before, because I know there were about 60% of us that haven't. I would suggest starting with the platforms themselves, and then you can look at these other tools such as Zoom or Restream that you can start to utilize once you've gotten a grasp of things. So now I'm going to host a breakout. I know that I've gotten a good bit of information out there. So hopefully we've been taking notes, and you can talk about what ideas maybe that you can apply that you've heard. So when you do go into your breakout, if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourselves, what state you're from, your role, and then maybe what has interested you that you've heard so far, or if you've done this for the 40% of you that have, maybe share some ideas. And if you're having any issue jumping into the breakout, we can always have our own breakout in this main room. Just let me know. All right, just a quick update, folks. I think the breakout, I think we had planned it was going to be about 5 minutes. So if you weren't able to join a breakout, we probably have another like 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes to go before we regroup. As a reminder for folks who are here, if you have any questions from anything you've heard, um, please feel free to put them in the chat. Or if you have any questions right now, feel free to let me know and I'll make sure to answer those either now or at the end. All right, I'm starting to see the numbers jump back up. So I think folks are headed back in. Hopefully, I always like it when I can chat things out from a presentation that I'm in and meet colleagues from across the country. So that was hopefully helpful for everyone there. We'll give it a couple more seconds and then we'll keep going. All right, it looks like we have just about everyone. Um, so like I said, I hope that breakout was helpful and that you got some ideas maybe I hadn't even mentioned that other colleagues had. Moving forward, I'm going to start talking about it in this. I do behind the scenes, and I love to hear what other folks do behind the scenes as well. But this is just an insider look that hopefully is helpful for y'all. Oh, we just got a number of folks that just joined. So um, just as an update, we're starting to get an inside look just at what we do behind the scenes at NCSL. Hopefully I've given some good examples of legislators as well as legislature groups and what they're doing with live streaming. This is just going to give you an inside look at our preparation techniques. So first, I'm very type A, so I start with a plan, even if it comes to live streaming, which I know sometimes I've seen folks may just give a quick behind the scenes look. I still like to make sure that I've prepared for that. So the first thing that I do is identify a need. And I'm actually using very real examples. The image that I have here is our December month plan. As you can see, we have an occupational licensing rollout that we had states from across the country participate in the last couple of years. And we're currently doing that. And a bit on that is we're hosting a town hall tomorrow. And the reason that I decided to do that was I knew for months this was coming up. We went ahead and reached out to our partner organizations. And so I reached out to the Council of State Governments as well as the National Governors Association. And we're doing a group live stream tomorrow at 12:30 if you wanted to tune in just to see how everything finally wraps together. But I identified the need this week for that. And then moving forward, for example, and this might be a bit more relatable, I've highlighted a town hall for 2021 state legislative sessions. So I know next week, that's going to be our last town hall of the year. And I think folks are interested in safety protocols and measures and updates and changes in legislatures. And so that's what we're hosting our town hall on, because I know that that's what's going to be on folks' mind when we get back in January. And that's one of my tips. My other tip is when I started, I introduced myself and said, I really hope from this presentation, you can either get something new or just add on to what you already know and do. I always say, keep in mind what your brand is. And so for us, that is, major information updates for our town halls. So when you decide, if you decide to start doing something like this, live streaming, think about really what you want to utilize it for. The next is just a blown up image of that. So if you had any questions about, what that plan were to look like, this is kind of how I break things down. But I do know we're recording this as well. So if you wanted to go back and look at it, you can. Invite guests, just like I would do at a press event or a Hill briefing or anything like that. I'm going to invite folks. I treat this just like I would if folks are in person. So I have an example here, like I said, all real examples of I actually reach out to a colleague. So for the folks who worked on our occupational licensing rollout, I asked them if they could reach out to our partners and copy me, and that way they know what was going on. And then I send a calendar invitation that has logistics, a time frame, as well as talking points. An example that I can use here is, let's say that you have a committee meeting or something that's going on in a specific caucus that's working with another group. You can outreach to that. You can have 2 point persons that can outreach to each other and organize that and send a calendar invitation that way. And then for talking points, I treat this just like I have if someone's giving a speech or if they're giving an update. You saw I had some examples of folks from their Instagram live streams that were giving updates on policies. One was on a recent, was on natural disaster relief because they had a tornado run through Tennessee. Anything like that, I have talking points prepared. And I think that's very helpful, even if it's something quick like that. And so you'll see here, these are my talking points for tomorrow. So you get a bit of an insider look, and it has an introduction and it points to, I even have my role. I'm going to be showcasing a resource, and then my colleague Mick is going to be the host and he's going to introduce the next person. And so I treat it just like that. And I do ask for help. So I don't know as much about occupational licensing. So if it's anything that, if you're communication staff, or if you may not know a policy, if you just need a bit more information, I know that all of us know that, but I always ask for help if I need it. And then, as I said, I pre-draft just like a speech. And then I promote it. So if we are utilizing social media for live streaming, I think we should utilize social media to promote that live stream itself. And so we do that. Up to a week before, we're promoting our live streams across all. So we utilize Facebook and Instagram for live streaming, but we promote this on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. I think that's very helpful. And that way folks know that you're on each of these major platforms. So that's 2 birds with 1 stone. And then, as I said, brand your live stream event. So we have the same colors, the same style, and you'll see the stay tuned graphic pops up in our live stream as well. So folks they consistently, that branding, that color, they'll consistently recognize what you're doing. I know the image is not that great, and the next time I do this, I'm going to get a better one. However, as far as execution, I hope everyone gets a laugh of it though. As far as execution is concerned, we've got all of our prep. We've invited folks, we've contacted our colleagues, whether it's in another caucus or chamber or wherever you may be, and you've sent the calendar invites, you've promoted. It's the day before your live stream. So get onto your, whether it's on Facebook and you're utilizing Facebook itself, you can do a test run on Facebook and on Twitter and on LinkedIn, just like you can with something like what we have. So you can actually invite folks to do a dry run if they're not quite comfortable. And you can test it that way, because I know a lot of us aren't used to doing this from our desktops or our phones. And I strongly encourage that, because that way you can check the audio visual and make sure that the sound is good, as well as backgrounds. So this isn't a great example. You're getting my kitchen. But wherever you are, think about the background that folks have. When we have folks log on, we want to make sure they're at the same height. If it's on Facebook, if it's just an Instagram live stream, we want to make sure that they are fully in the picture. They're not cropped out. So those are things that a day before test run is good for. And then you have live. So this is what it looks like to our audience. I've had a couple of these images, but my tips for live streaming. One, monitor the comments, not in a bad way. A lot of these platforms actually allow you, I know with our software, we can push the comment to the front, so into the actual live stream itself. Let's say you're utilizing the capability of Facebook or of Twitter or of Instagram, and you're the producer, or you have your phone, whatever it is, you can actually have the host, if it's you or the producer, you can tell the host, hey, this comment, this question has come up and this is very relevant. And so it's actually very helpful that way, because folks see you're paying attention. And then aim, I strongly encourage to aim between 5 and 15 minutes. Now, if it's a full meeting, that's a different scenario. And I understand we have the legislative summit, for example, will last an hour and a half sessions from that. And if you're doing an entire a Senate meeting or a House meeting, that's going to last longer, and that's understandable. But if this is an update on a major resource, or if it's just getting to know someone, aim between 5 and 15 minutes and prepare for tech issues. I think we're in like month 9 or 10 now of what this virtual environment. However, and so we may be more comfortable with tech issues, but let's say this is your first or second time utilizing a live stream platform, your Wi-Fi goes down, prepare for things like that and have a backup plan. So you saw that stay tuned graphic that we have. Let's say one of my guests that we're bringing in from Colorado or Maine or Oregon, or wherever it is, their feed goes down. I will let my host know, my colleague Mick, and we'll pull everything down. We'll put up that graphic. And when we reconnect, we'll pull everyone back on. Folks are used to that at this point. And so I always just say, be overcautious about that. And then post-production. So one thing that I do suggest is, let's say you probably do this already if you've utilized any type of live streaming, but have a bumper on the beginning and end of your live stream, because you'll have a 30-second to 1 minute lag. If you're using a third-party platform, if you're using Facebook, it's usually only like 15 seconds, but that's still lag time where someone is just on the screen not talking, or it will catch them and they're already in mid-sentence. So have a bumper. And when I say edit lag time, that's what I mean. Edit that bumper out, but that's just for protocol, at least for safety for me, so that you get the full announcement or the full meeting. And then utilize other communication methods. I talked about cross promotion for pre-production. For post-production, we actually have our marketing team. We send out newsletters. Maybe if you send out news in the morning, I know when I worked at the governor's office in Georgia, we'd send out news every morning. So maybe you can include that at the top and say, here is an update from, so-and-so chamber or agency or whatever. And that way you get further engagement, and that goes out to completely different people than who may have watched you live on social media. Again, I will get better screenshots. However, for this purpose, I want you to get an inside look at what a third-party platform might look like. So we saw what Facebook looked like earlier. We saw what Instagram looked like. This is what you're going to get behind the scenes of a platform. So this is BeLive. This is what we use. And I would like to say it is very affordable. I know right now folks aren't like budgets and everything, but down the road, keep it in mind. But this allows us to connect to Facebook, to YouTube, as well as to LinkedIn. We utilize it for Facebook and LinkedIn. But what I've pulled down here is that is how we connect. We embed our platforms into this third party, and then we put our title and our description there. So when the live stream pops up, it's already there. Keeping in mind, if you're utilizing Facebook or Twitter, you're using a direct connect, like a direct platform, you can schedule these ahead of time and you can do the same thing. So you can actually put in the title and description on those. When I showed you earlier where to click, you can just say, I'm scheduling this for tomorrow, and go ahead and have the title and description done. Another option that you can do with these type of platforms is that I can actually share my screen similar to how I'm doing on Zoom, and you can share a tab or a window. And so if you were to ever watch an NCSL live or living room town hall, you would see that we share web pages a good bit so that folks can see what we're talking about. So let's say you're hosting a meeting and someone's talking about a policy. You can actually pull that up and you can showcase and scroll down to what point they're talking about with platforms like this. So it's actually very helpful in that regard. And then the final is, I brought up the Today Show at the very beginning. If you look here, you can actually do this with platforms like this. I have a scrolling message at the bottom. Here's an example for legislative staff training. And then I have the title. That's where I usually put someone's name, their title, and then at the bottom is where I'll update the question or the links or anything like that. So it does operate quite a bit like a broadcast you'd see on TV. So I know I've thrown a lot more information at you, which is why we're doing another poll. And I just want to see what our thoughts are on capacity, because I know that you all already do about 5 jobs individually. All right, so it looks like about 75% of folks voted, and given that we're about 30 minutes in, that's really great. Glad to see folks are engaged, and it's actually that's a great response once again. 55% concerned about capacity, and I 100% agree, and I actually thought that the number would be higher, but it's good to see otherwise. So the reason I ask is I'm now going to move on to best practices, and these are things that hopefully will help you. So I've talked about how to use a tool, what tools to use, and what you should include in that. I want to show you how to make it easier for yourselves, and not easier as in less quality, but easier as in a strong message. So as far as Facebook, I live in Virginia, so I picked up Governor Northam. This was a while ago, but he did a live stream, and I use this as an example. So I say that I tend to think, and I've looked this up a good bit and watched partner organizations as well as legislatures, the purpose for Facebook live streaming, I would strongly advise looking at it as informative. So for this was talking about legislative proposals, and the last 8 months, the majority I've seen on Facebook are talking about updates as far as safety measures, COVID protocols, things like that. 1 to 2 sentences for your post. You're doing a live stream because you're talking to people. So there's no need to have the entire thing posted out. We want people to pay attention and not just read it. And like I said, recognize that a lot of these are going to be used for larger meetings. But let's say you're doing something like what we did, or what I've shown you before, where you're hosting people from multiple areas from their own feeds. I say keep it between 1 to 3, maybe 4 people. And this is both easy for the producer, which would be y'all, as well as that way people aren't distracted. And then frequency. This is where it depends. So, and I'll show you in a couple slides as far as analytics, but for us once weekly is about what we want to look at. Otherwise, folks, it's overkill. But I know as capacity, let's say this is your first time starting this out, start it once a month and see how that goes from there. But I will say, unless it's a meeting, a large meeting that you're broadcasting, if you're doing an update, keep it between 5 and 15 minutes because the drop off rate is very high after about 5 minutes. Behind the scenes, so best practices for Instagram. And I haven't done for every platform, I just chose to utilize 2. But so I look at the purpose of this, at least this is what we utilize, as well as a number of folks that I work with, is behind the scenes. So let's say that your update was on Facebook, you're putting out the full session or a full meeting, for example. Perhaps on Instagram, we don't do the full meeting because there is a 10-minute capacity for Instagram. It's called IGTV videos. Do between a 1 and 5 minute video talking to someone that was at that meeting or that will be at that meeting, and they will tell people, here's what we will be talking about. Head to our Facebook live stream for the full meeting. So that's what I mean when a behind the scenes. That is a good example, I would think. I picked a couple here. So one is a local city, and then one is a starting point, which is someone we worked with at Basecamp. But the reason I do that is because you see it's at 4 people, and it's a lot of people. And I always say look at between 1 to 2 people, especially if it's behind the scenes. Have 1 person or 2 people focused and limit it at that. But there are other examples of it's behind the scenes at a meeting, and you just want to showcase the lighter side of what you're doing. That's why I picked up this Port's Instagram. And then 1 to 2 times weekly. This is ideal, but being honest with y'all, I'm the person that runs broadcasting. There's only 1 of me. So I do not, we usually post once a week on Instagram for an update as far as a live stream. So it depends on your capacity, but this is what is ideal, is 1 to 2 times weekly that I've spoken with other legislators and legislative staff. And I will have some numbers to back that up because I always like quantitative information. So when to live stream. I know this is a big question. A lot of the times it's when to post. When to live stream is, it's pretty similar. And so we like to target that. So on Facebook, we look at weekdays. If anyone's doing this on the weekend, kudos to y'all. But we try to look at numbers. And so here, as you can see, I pulled these from 2020. Engagement rates were highest where it's darkest on this heat graph. So you're looking at midweek, morning to mid-afternoon. So if you have something going on, if it's a set time, obviously you can't control that. But if it's something that you're doing yourself, like a virtual press event, something like that, look at doing it during those times, morning to mid-afternoon, weekdays, and that's on Facebook. And it does change based on the platform because your audience is different. So for example, on Instagram, you're looking at weekdays still, but you can see that it is further in the week, and then it is mid to late afternoon. So I'm not sure if folks are shifting their direction from, they're paying attention from Facebook to Instagram, but this is something I pulled from 2020 reports. This is not me. This is what these platforms submitted their data and they were compiled. And this is when the engagement is highest. And you can say, well, that may not be my audience. I know. So when I talked earlier about analytics, I wasn't kidding. If you're going to use these platforms and their software, I would suggest, you probably already do this if you work with social media, but to look at your insights. So on Facebook is an example that I'm using. It's a similar screenshot to what I had shown earlier, but instead of pointing out where to go live under the post, if you look at that first picture on the left-hand side, I have the drop-down bar and I highlighted insights. And on the right-hand side, the big picture, you can see that actually our engagement is a bit different from what I showed you earlier. So if you're just starting out, I would utilize these graphs, these heat graphs to start out. But I would say every couple of weeks, every month or so, I go in and check where our engagement is to see how it changes. So for example, we are every single day, people are on our page. And the time is from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. It does not waver. It's not higher at certain points. So that's something to keep in mind the further you go. And then looking at best practices, I got a couple more of these and I promise I'll wrap soon. However, state guidelines is just that I want to make sure people are aware of. Social media guidelines, because this is live streaming for social media, states do have guidelines. And if we have any HR staff on here, I'm sure, hopefully they're glad that I pulled this up. But there are usage policies and site policies and disclaimers, and I've included the link here, but we track that. And so you can actually see specific chambers as well as legislatures have these. So if there's anything as far as live streaming, you may want to check and make sure. And then I've just included a couple of examples here because there are differences between the legislature itself and then a specific site's platform. And these are things that to keep in mind. So best practices, I always say, think before you post. Just treat it just like if you were live and you were speaking, or if someone was speaking and it was a live event. Everything you put out onto this live stream is official. So my don'ts, I'll start with first. I said this earlier, but don't, in the broadcast due to IT issues, have a backup plan and utilize that. Do a test run beforehand. The two others are a bit more general, but you will see, if you had seen on when I shared a screenshot, we had some comments when I was talking about engagement. A couple weren't as friendly, but if you see that, do not engage. I always say, even in this capacity, they're there. That means they're engaging, even if it's not in the best of light. Now, if there's anything derogatory, do not ban or block followers. You do have state policies and guidelines for that, so you need to refer to those. However, there are capacities in these platforms where you can report those comments. Do have a warm up for guests. I mentioned that earlier. Make sure that they are well aware. Have a calendar invite if you're not going to do that. At least have a phone call with them beforehand. Talk about the logistics. Treat it just like it is just like an event. Have a backup plan. This feeds back into if something happens with your Wi-Fi. If someone doesn't show up, we've had that happen a number of times. Someone just doesn't show up onto our live stream, and so we have backup plans for that. Push related comments or questions. I think I mentioned this earlier. But if you see a question pop up and it's a relevant question, it contributes to the conversation, utilize that engagement. And then my biggest do is to start simple. As I said, I know I've thrown a lot of information at you and I hope it's relevant and helpful for you. But as I've said, I'm the one person operating broadcasting. And so we tend to keep things pretty simple. We have our weekly town halls. We have a couple of live streams on Instagram that we'll do related to that. Some people will get a bit more in depth. But if that's the capacity you can do, start there and then grow from it. As I said, just like starting from these numbers and then growing to feeding into your numbers. And then in review, I started with the Today Show, so I'm going to end with the Tonight Show. Understand the basics. So your constituents' needs. So for us, that is they're most engaged with major updates, as well as with relevant topics that are happening right now. So I talked about the 2021 legislative sessions. So understand what folks are looking for, your capacity. I've mentioned this multiple times, but I know as legislative staff, just start simple and go from there. Add this as a tool to your belt, but just keep in mind that I myself only do once a week. And then tools. I showcased to you the tools such as the Facebook platform, the Twitter platform, the Instagram platform themselves. I also talked about third-party tools. And then I showed you a behind the scenes of a third-party platform and things you can get from that. Have a plan. Prepare for your plan. So everything ahead of time that I had talked about, which includes anything from connecting with your colleagues and then reaching out to folks who are involved in the live stream. Execution. So everything I talked about the day before and the day of, do your AV checks, do the background checks, have the backup plans, and then promotion. So post-promotion. Utilize other communication methods, other groups to push this out, push your information out there, especially if you're just starting. Know your state policies, something I always include. Social media, legislation's still catching up to it, and it's better to be safe and refer to those guidelines. And then know your do's and don'ts. I can't bring that up enough and like I said, I'll just go right back to it. Everything I had mentioned earlier, from don't fret about IT issues, to understanding the comments and the engagement, of course, starting simple. And from that, I'm going to end things. Hopefully I timed it about 10 to 15 minutes for questions if we have any. But thank y'all so much for joining this, and really appreciate your time, and hopefully you can take some great things back to your home state.
Thank you, Berkeley. So you've shared some really great information and helpful do's and don'ts. What do you wish that you knew before you got? What's one thing that you wish you knew before you got started that might be helpful to this group?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I built that into my my do's and don'ts. I want everything to be perfect from the get-go, and we had some IT issues, and I panicked, and so that's why I have built in to be prepared for that. And some things I wish I knew were to treat this just like it would be a formal event. So that's why I harp on try and make this a bit more formal to start out, and see how that works for you. And then lastly, all of those tools, I didn't know about most of those when I started. We were asked to start this in March. And so I had to do a lot of research on my own, and I'd wish I had known a bit more that Facebook has the capacity to do test runs, and Instagram has a capacity to do that. And they have those built-in features that we could have utilized. Now, I really like our platform, of course, so hopefully gathering them together for you, you can test run a few of those yourselves, and you don't have to go through quite the background there.
Okay, so I think that's all for questions. Do you have any other things you would like to add, Berkeley, before we sign off?
I don't think so. I think I about hit everything, but I did include my information here. So let's say you have any individual questions about a specific platform, or any follow-ups that you haven't thought of now, please feel free to reach out. I work from home, and I'm a bit glued to my computer, like we all are. And so I'm so happy to help anyone that has questions on this topic.
Okay, well, thank you, Berkeley. This was really informative and helpful, and thank you to Links for sponsoring today. So please let us know if you have any questions afterwards.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.